Well, good morning, Yash. Thank you so much for having a chat with me today. So, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. Delighted to be here. Thanks, Tiff. I'm Janusz Stabik. I'm a managing partner at GYDA, Grow Digital Agency. We help agency owner, founder, directors, and leadership teams with growth. Growth being quite a broad term, and whatever that means to the individual founder, be it entering new markets, revenue and profitability growth, prepping for exit, or even sometimes getting a little bit smaller and giving a bit of time and freedom back to said founders.
That's interesting. I want to come back to that last one because that's an interesting
Right.
choice. I think that's a really good one. Um, I can understand that these days business is really high pressure, isn't it? And is that something you're seeing more owner founders say, actually, I don't want all the hassle of having a big team and having to feed lots of mouths. I just want to retrench a little bit.
Yeah, at the moment, a lot of director fatigue, I think we're calling it. We kind of have three different mindsets or three different situations that agencies are in when they approach us for help. One is things are really tough, things are potentially broken. I'm kind of at my wit's end. Help us to fix it, please. That's bucket number one. Number two is things are going okay. Yeah, or pretty good actually. Things are going well. What next? Where do we go?
Yeah.
How do we continue on our growth? And then the third is things are going really, really well. We've made some hay whilst the sun shone, and we've got a great business here. How do we lock in value for the future? And through time, things change. COVID happens,
Mm.
technology changes, wars happen, all that kind of stuff. So the context changes. I'd say probably over the past 18 months, we have a high degree of agencies in that first tranche coming to us. There's a lot of things are tough. Um, Agencies not necessarily falling off a cliff,
Mhm.
but it's become a grind.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
become
A
hard
bit of
to
a
do.
slog.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And are there any common themes to the drivers for that for agency owners?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. We have kind of a global client base, so the drivers are quite different across different regions. In the UK, inflation
Yeah.
initially, salary inflation for technical and creative employees.
Yes.
That particularly for some types of agencies, digital marketing agencies in particular, where historically they performed pretty well, all of a sudden, profitability was shrinking quite quickly. So that happened.
Yeah.
Technology, AI, hit us all really, really quickly. It was always on the horizon, always on the agenda as this thing that was going to happen soon, and then it happened. And clients started asking about it, either demanding that agencies use it or don't use it, or that they could
Yeah.
do a lot of it themselves, or that they'd expect a lower price,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Increased competitiveness, I
Mhm.
think, every day two kids leave university with a laptop and set up a website in Squarespace and call themselves an agency. And so, across the various segments of
Yeah.
agencies, from performance to web design,
Yeah.
UX, every day it just gets more and more competitive. Clients get more aware.
Mm.
Clients ask for more
Yeah.
for their budget because they know what to ask for, and they're more
Yeah.
demanding. Um, and I think just generally in the economy, a lot of the clients, it's very broad, I think, there's a bit of reticence, I think, due to the economy. So it's taking longer to sign off projects.
Mm.
Um, they're asking for more, or there's a lot of kind of internal insourcing going on. So a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and if it wasn't hard enough to run an agency anyway, this stuff just kind of compounds to that pressure and that director fatigue, I think, that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think the educated and aware and able client, it's a
Mm,
mixed blessing, isn't it? Because there would have been a time 10 years ago where you thought, I wish our clients understood a bit more about what we do. It's like talking
yeah,
to a brick wall, and now all of a sudden they do, but they think actually we can do some of that ourselves, or we
yeah,
can use ChatGPT for writing our blog posts. And so yeah, we're seeing that too. But when you read online content, I still think there's a lot of that that shouts out, no human was involved in my creation.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it switches you off, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think you can see some of it pure, poorly prompted AI. You see it going a mile off. A lot of agencies have kind of broken the back of it, though. They've realized that it's a tool and
Mhm.
it makes us 20%, 30% more efficient. So it
Yeah,
does some of the grunt work and the task-oriented stuff, but there's
yeah,
still a need for the creative human brain on top of
yeah.
that.
I guess like all tools, it needs to have a capable driver, doesn't it? It needs to have an intelligent brain directing the tool, and as you say, asking the right prompts, and that's where getting a really good agency on your side with the right sort of brain is going to drive better outcomes quicker. Uh,
Yeah.
so, do you think that clients are looking to exit their relationships with agencies? They think actually we've signed up for a year or 3 years, and maybe we don't need these guys anymore.
Um, I think it's hard to say. It's very hard to say anything useful because the market is broad and deep.
Yeah,
So I think it's fair to say it's cyclical.
yeah,
There's trends without outsourcing and using agencies, and then clients look at their budget and they go, holy cow, we're spending a lot of money on this agency. Let's build a team.
yeah,
They build a team, and then they realize that they have to invest in training and
yeah.
development, and then they're getting kind of left behind. And they look
Mm.
at the cost and they go, wow, this team's
That
costing
team
us.
looks really cost effective. Actually, let's go back to the agency. That's much more cost effective. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's definitely, I think in the grand scheme of things, yes, there are a lot of clients that are doing it these days.
Yeah,
I think there's still a place for the agency, right now.
absolutely.
So it's not as if everybody suddenly said we're gonna do this internally. So yes, there are trends, and in difficult operating conditions, financially, economically, there's a lot of clients doing it at the moment.
So, what are the characteristics of agencies that you see who are doing well? What are the things that they're doing that other agencies perhaps aren't doing so much of?
Yeah, I wish I could give you again a theme here. Sometimes it's quite easy to say. I think like post COVID, it was really easy to say, well, those agencies that are really deeply embedded in e-commerce are thriving because people are at home buying loads of stuff that they don't
Yeah.
need, and but at the moment, positioning, I would
Mhm.
say, and it's difficult for me to say which positioned agencies. We've got agencies operating in professional services, hospitality, PR, digital PR, um, but equally quite broad, fully integrated agencies. So from a business model perspective, I think it's difficult for me to say, oh, this type of agency is
Well,
doing well at the moment. I think it's more easy to say those agencies that are struggling. I think a lot of web design, build, development, a lot of video agencies are particularly struggling
yeah.
at the moment, because they're more project centric,
Mm,
big, complex technical and creative projects that are hard to estimate and deliver on time, and
yeah.
technology and platform as a service, infrastructure as a service has come in and kind of really, really tapped away at their space. So
Yeah.
they're finding it tough. I think a lot of digital marketing and performance agencies are still doing well, but the days of making hay whilst the sun shines are probably over, and they're now
Yeah.
finding it, oh, it 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 can be quite tough to run an agency, whereas previously it's been easy. You've just
They
got
thought
to,
it was an easy activity. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, what about within those businesses? So, sector-wise, it might be tricky to say, well, maybe some of these are easier, some of these are not. Um, Obviously, you and your team help agency owners to
Mm.
build up their sort of core strength, if you like. You're like their personal trainer, really, aren't you, to help them
Yeah,
build up the core strength of their business and give them better resilience when times are tough, and hopefully allow them to make more hay on those occasions that the sun actually comes out.
yeah,
So what are the things that you're building in? What are the muscles that you're helping these
yeah.
agency owners to build up within their organizations?
Yeah, so there's two ways to do this. One isn't very helpful. The first way is go go hang around the right bar at Paddington Station for long enough, and you'll eventually stand next to the CMO of Nike, and you'll get that big deal.
Yeah.
But hope isn't a strategy, as
Yeah.
the cliche goes. The other way is to make a predictably scalable, profitable business. That's what we want. We want our business to be like other businesses, like accountancy firms, where we can put a budget together and have some belief that tomorrow that budget is still going to be valuable, and that our
Yeah.
forecasts and sales pipelines mean something, and we can build a business and plan around it. That's what we want.
Yeah.
And for that, we need three things to be true. And these are the kind of muscles, as you say, that we try to help agencies build. We need, this kind of used to be a little bit more optional. It's mandated and it's required now. You need some kind of standout positioning. It's too competitive. There is no position, actually, where you can have a USP. There just isn't. The USP is gone. It's too competitive.
Yeah.
10, 15 years ago, you could be unique. You can't be now. But you do need to go narrower, because if you're not, you're just lost amongst the noise. So some kind of either vertical positioning coupled with technology positioning, pricing, geography, targeting a given geography of client. You've just got to be one of 5 or 10.
Rather than 500 or 5,000. Yeah.
Exactly. And then when you have that, you can be deliberate and predictable with your marketing. So you have to do both standout positioning plus marketing, and you have to do marketing with a system behind it for a minimum of 9 months to start seeing predictable results. But you can't have the effective marketing if you don't have the standout positioning. So muscle number one is that. Don't pass go. Don't collect £200 until we've done that, because everything else is hard off the back of it. When you have that, we need strong commercials. And it's kind of dependent on the first piece around positioning, because if you're a really, really broad, blandly positioned agency, how much do you charge? Well, it's difficult because you're working with an accountancy firm and an e-commerce company and whatever. So building kind of consistent margin is challenging. If you're an agency that's focused particularly on law firms, then you can work out your cost of customer acquisition, how much it's going to cost you to deliver the service, and price appropriately, and ideally be delivering a minimum of 50 to 60% gross margin. And most agencies underperform there, and that's where they struggle financially. So building a strong commercial model off the back of the positioning.
Just sorry to interrupt you, Janusz. On that, you said most agencies struggle there. What is it that they struggle with? Is it the getting somebody to agree to pay the price that they think it should cost? Is it delivering within that budget?
All that. So if we go back to the example of web agencies again, a web agency has to estimate a really, really complex, technical, long project on a spreadsheet before they've done any work. So they pick a number. As we've said, the clients are more aware. So the client says, well, can I have it using Laravel and React and integrating with, so the client asks for more, and the agency says, yeah, okay, we'll squeeze that in, and we cross our fingers and hopefully we can deliver it on time. And this is where roller coaster revenue comes from. We're dependent on projects. It's difficult to estimate and deliver. Client asks for more. So it's difficult to estimate, and it's difficult to deliver on time. And that's where the gross margin on some of these agencies ends up being sort of 15 to 20%, and that leaves nothing left over to pay the overheads, let alone generate a profit.
That sounds quite scary. Do they use, so obviously coming from Devant background, we're all about the contract and the commercial relationship. Is that something that you think agencies use effectively enough? Do you see agencies even thinking about that, or is it just, we've got a PO, let's go?
All of the above, I think. All of the above. I love it when we onboard a client and we go and we look at contracts and they're really strong. But I would say 70% of the time, contracts are a thing that we know we should do, or we do them, but we downloaded them from Simply Docs, or this really bland master services agreement that means everything to everybody and isn't
nothing to anybody, actually. Yeah.
I'd say it's often lacking. It's often not either not there or there and not used. They haven't been upfront about it. It's not something that's been discussed with the client. It's not something that they sit and walk through with the client and talk
Yeah.
about warranties and risks and assumptions,
Yeah.
and having those conversations up front before you start work might
Mm.
be difficult, but it's a hell of a lot easier than doing it when you need to
Oh,
rely on it
absolutely.
later down the line.
But it's but you mentioned the assumptions. That's the thing that I think. So from our perspective at Devant, when people come to us because they've got themselves into a pickle, should we say politely, when the sticky stuff is definitely hitting the fan, and they say, "Oh, we've done all this work, and the client doesn't want to pay for these bits because they say that was all in scope." And we've had conversations as we've gone along to say there's going to be an extra charge, and they say no, there isn't, and they didn't do this thing they were supposed to do, and we say, well, let's have a look at what you've got. And a lot of the time, what they've got is so vague.
Mm,
And they'll list out assumptions like, the client will provide all of the written content.
mm, mm,
And I think, okay, and the client says, yeah, I've sent you content. And
mm.
your content guys are, oh my goodness, yeah, did you see what they sent us? We can't put that on the site. And there's such a aversion to being upfront and clear and telling the client that they need to do some work here.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see that? Do you think that agencies are generally good at having those conversations with clients, or are they just too scary?
I'd say there's definitely a theme. You go to any agency, you look at any agency plus um, 25 employees, 30 employees, and on the whole, they're largely all over it because they've made all the mistakes. They've been burned before. They've
Yeah,
had too many projects that the client didn't pay or that they ended up over servicing to a factor of
yeah,
500%,
yeah,
and they've gone, okay, we need to do something about this. And they've invested in client services or, a commercial manager, and they've gone, we need to sort this out. And it's not a problem. It's a yes if conversation, not a
absolutely.
no because.
Yeah,
And the smaller agencies, typically the smaller headcount, potentially younger, newer agencies, that they're not always. They're still trying to figure that out, and they haven't been burned enough by it, I think, or they haven't been involved in an agency previously where contracting was just the way that we do things around here, and it's bread and butter. So I'd say there's you can definitely align that to probably the success of the agency, right?
success and the sort of maturity it is, as
Yeah,
you say, it's a kind of it's a maturity cycle that businesses go through, isn't it? And I think
yeah,
they start out, and as you say, it's simply docs, and if you
yeah,
remember,
yeah.
and then it becomes embedded into the process, and it sort of gets embedded into the way of thinking and the way of working of the agency, so that they make sure everybody's clear on what's going on at the outset, and then they manage it.
I mean, contracting as a concept is interesting. We're always contracting, right? And we're always getting burned by um, misunderstanding or ambiguity around expectations. When we're managing our
Yeah,
team, we're working with agencies, and 70% of people in 70% of problems internally at agencies are people problems,
yeah,
but that comes from verbal contracting. We had this conversation 3 weeks ago, and I said this thing, and I expected you to do this thing, and it's not been done. What the hell's happened? And
yeah,
the employees going, that's not what I remember. So
yeah.
just contracting as a concept, that verbal agreement or written agreement around expectations, just I think is often lacking on the whole.
I think that's really, really good observation. There's a quote, and I wish I could remember whose quote it was. Perhaps someone will tell me. The great thing about communication is the myth that it's ever actually occurred.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I have
like,
that in a slide in a deck actually. I love that quote. It's a real kind of oh yeah, that's
yeah,
our
that's it.
that's our
We
problem.
talked. I made noise. You nodded, and vice versa. But
Yeah,
was there actually any exchange of
yeah,
information that went on here?
yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. We were talking before this meeting. about AI and the AI summaries that are available on the tools,
Mm.
which we will be using for this one. So we'll produce a summary and then take a look and see how closely that reflects our conversation. But you made the really interesting observation that it was useful to see what a third party, an objective third party, if we can call the AI that,
Mm.
made of the conversation and recorded from the conversation. It sort of almost, if it wasn't a really big brother terrifying thought, kind of makes you think, well, maybe we should carry that little AI summary thing around with us. It's like, well, when we do the he said, she said thing, well, this is what the AI thing would say.
It's very true. It's very true. I mean, the conversation for the benefit of your audience, the conversation we were having was around how I'd ran a workshop last week, and we audio recorded the workshops and the interviews, and I made my notes and recorded what I took from those interviews and the conversations, and then I took the transcripts and the recordings and played them through ChatGPT and said, give me your observations. What was the summary? What were the key themes and issues? And how the AI interpreted the conversation differently to me and more thoroughly than I had when I made my notes.
It has a much better memory as well. I
Yeah,
think that's my challenge. Obviously, when you're having lots of meetings and lots of discussions, it's easy to miss things or to not necessarily pick up on the significance of things.
yeah, yeah,
So a counterparty will say something, and we find this really happens a lot in contract negotiations, actually, when a client is putting some point forward and they'll mention something as an aside, and whatever that was, that turns out to be the thing that really is critical for getting to agreement.
yeah.
If you're not paying attention, it will just wash right over you.
I think if you're not paying attention, and equally, the we all have our own worldviews. We see the world in a certain way, which is a consequence of our experience, our age, our personality profile, how tired we are, or whatever. And equally,
Whether we've eaten lunch, yeah,
yeah,
all that
and
stuff.
equally when information comes in,
Yeah.
it's processed through that same filter, and only certain information comes in. So we, in those conversations, a contracting conversation, for example, we filter stuff out through those biases that perhaps we don't deem as important because of body language or the way it was said or when it was said, etc. And that's the thing that's later relied on in court, right? That
Yeah, absolutely. Or the reverse, which happens quite a lot as well, which is that we imply stuff into
yeah,
conversations because we think that's obvious. Everybody knows that. Of course, we're going to be doing that. Of course, you're going to do that because that's just obvious. You didn't mention it because you didn't need to, because it's obvious. But
yeah.
it might not be obvious to the other guy.
Want to be honest, the other guy, and when terms like industry best practice
Oh yeah,
gets thrown around,
yeah,
by either side,
yeah.
uh, I think that needs to be clarified, please, because there's a lot of assumption.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think for me, that's one of the fun bits of contracting and contract negotiation because it's kind of it feels to some people like it's just really pedantic and really sort of like ooh, ooh. But actually digging down to make sure that we both understand the same thing by the words that are on the page, if we've got as far as having a page, um, is an interesting process, and it's quite a good relationship building process, I think. Having those conversations, learning what they understood by industry
Yeah,
best practice as opposed to what we understood by industry best practice, that's a relationship building exercise if you do it right, isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely, and I think a lot of this comes down to a lot of agencies again are struggling right now. There's director fatigue. Business is hard to come by.
Mm.
Um, the more project-based agencies are reliant on projects coming through the door.
Yeah.
There's often a rush, that we are so desperate to win these projects that we say yes to stuff that we probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
And we rush this bit
Yeah.
just to get it over the line, because this seems like
Absolutely.
unnecessary bureaucracy and administration. Because if we can just pay the bills this time, next time is the next project is the one that we
Yes.
make our money on, and it's
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
manana, and it's And then it catches us out, and we regret taking the project on in the first place, and we have the opportunity cost of now actually not delivering that
Yeah.
project in the future because we've overserviced this one by
Yeah.
by 100, 200%.
We see that quite a lot when an organization's in that position of sort of not quite desperation, but getting that way. They
Yeah,
don't want to challenge anything that might rock the boat. So it's sort of, well, they've said this. Does it mean A or B? Well, it's better for us if it means B. It's probably better for them if it means A. If we use these kind of fuzzy words, it could be interpreted either way. And that's got to
yeah.
be good, hasn't it?
And
Because
that's yeah. Yeah,
no.
that moves the conversation along, doesn't it? That if we can skip past that bit. Do you know, I remember this from running my agency, and I was one of them. That was, I hold my hands up. I love the sales piece. I got that dopamine kick when we run a sale. So for me, it was just let's get the sale and we'll figure it out afterwards. Equally, I hated saying no, and I hated being assertive in the early days, or rather, I saw it as being assertive, and we were getting stung. The consequence of me not doing the due diligence and the contracting properly. And I remember we brought in our first account director. She was incredible. She knows who she is as well. And I
You
remember.
feel free to name check if you want to. That's
Okay, so this is Had Armitstead. And I remember for the first time, because I came from a technical background, I was a developer, and all that mattered was development, and client services was an unnecessary burden, right?
Mhm.
So in the early days, we were a technical agency, and I didn't value client services until somebody told us we needed it. So we invested in a client services director. And I remember those first pitches and those first conversations where I said, you run with this,
Mhm.
and I remember cringing. I remember being like, oh, you can't push back. You can't say that. We're going to lose this. And inside, I'm panicking, thinking we're going to lose the deal. And
Yeah.
but then watching closely, I noticed the way that she did it, and she did it with such calmness and leaning into the conversation and being genuinely curious and asking open questions and developing the relationship through asking these questions, that I then saw the magic and the alchemy in that it's not a pushback. This is a dance that gets us closer together. Actually, this is building the relationship rather than pushing them away. And it was a moment of awakening to me. And again, I think it's a lot of, you look at the larger agencies, potentially those that have higher levels of profitability, have a higher valuation when it comes to EBITDA, who have less roller coaster revenue, who have more consistent profit throughout the years. And I bet my bottom dollar they have a client services team in there who are maintaining relationships and did contracting properly and growing those accounts. And conversely, those that don't have them are often those that are just that they're a service provider rather than the trusted advisor.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really, really great observation. And that's a really nice shout out. I hope that she gets a chance to watch this and realize what
I'll
impact she
send it
had.
her way. I'm sure she'd love it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic because it's such an opportunity, having that conversation. And as you say, being calm and positive about it. I think there is this perception that all of contracts, it's all about finger
Yeah.
wagging and, oh, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it's something that I work on really hard with our team because obviously, we hire qualified solicitors. So they've
Mm.
been through law school, they've been through training contracts, they've been told this is how you lawyer. And that doesn't tend to involve a lot about relationship building. It doesn't involve, uncovering where things might be a little bit sticky and
Yeah.
actually we kind of need to see that, and I've been watching a lot of ER recently. So sorry, this is full disclosure. So I've kind of got this fascination at the moment with getting things fixed and healthy and good going forwards. And I think there is a parallel with building a new relationship to wound care. Okay, you might want to switch off and gross out at this point, so apologies. But you kind of need to know what's there
Yeah.
that you can clean it up and deal with it appropriately and put a sensible care plan in place. And I think when you're talking about your commercial relationships, you need to understand what are they really paranoid about? what things are they feeling inadequate about? How are we going to deal with this? Because we're going to have to, as we go through this relationship, and particularly those high growth organizations that have longer projects, longer relationships. It's not just an in-out campaign and they're gone and on to the next one. They're building ongoing value. All of those sort of little niggles that might not crop up in those initial meetings, they're still going to be there and they're going to bubble away. And at some stage, they're going to rear their heads and they're going to cause a challenge.
Yeah.
So embracing that and really trying to pull that out and get to the bottom of it and find a way forward through it as early as you can is going to put that relationship in a much, much better position for the long term.
And the research is there that those, and this isn't just agencies, this is businesses in general. The longer and the more thorough the onboarding contracting process takes, the greater the lifetime value of the client, the longer the longevity from a time perspective, the longer the client kind of stays with you, the more they spend with you in the long term.
Interesting.
The shorter and less thorough, i.e., yes, great, we'll get started and go missing for 2 to 3 months. Those clients churn within 6 to 9 months, typically.
Wow.
But from that point of kind of saying, yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah.
Extending that period out and being more thorough actually sets you off on a better footing. And from that point on, it affords you some mistakes because you've spent the time to kind of build a relationship with the client going forward. So although I appreciate fully it perhaps doesn't feel like that when you're clambering to just get the work over the line and then start the work, actually just investing in that time to ask the questions and build the relationship in the early days pays dividends in the long term.
That makes total sense. That's really interesting. I didn't know that there's been research on that. I'd be really grateful if you could share that, and then perhaps we can pop some links in. That would be terrific.
Yeah, well, it comes from a chap called Joey Coleman. His book, which is effectively on client relationships, never lose a customer again, is his piece.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. That sounds really good. And I think that whole early stage, understanding each other, using the contract to help you through that conversation rather than seeing it as okay, we'll just kind of slide this over the table. When you hear that, oh, it's all standard, just sign it, And of course, I suppose if you got it from Simply Docs, that's true. It is all standard. It's not going to do much, but it's there. Having that detailed conversation at the beginning and that onboarding piece, I can see that really sets businesses up for success. I'm conscious that I've used a lot of your time this morning, so I'm going to ask you if you can have a think. If there's one golden nugget, and I know that there are so many things to choose from, but if you were I say young in terms of the business, not necessarily age, because we all come to things at different stages. If you were a young agency owner in the first year or two of your agency's existence, and you happen to be here at this time, what would the bit of advice be that you think would have been most useful to set you off on the right path and help you grow a successful business?
Hang around the right bar at Paddington and hopefully you'll bump into the CMO of Nike one day. No, I'd always start with positioning. Everything gets easier after that. Everything gets easier. And I don't just mean marketing. If you're a broad, blandly positioned agency, you're the as my Greek client put it to me, you're like a Greek taverna. You've got a menu that sells 50 things. It's difficult to make money. It's stressful to run. It's difficult to procure for because you've got a billion ingredients. It's just chaos.
Yeah,
everything's difficult. When you go tighter on your positioning, I use your business as an example. Yeah, you help agencies with legal services and contracting, right? Everything becomes easier. You know who to recruit. You know where to do your marketing. When you're recruiting people, you see the gap in them. It's like, okay, we need to develop kind of client services and relationship building skills. Your internal processes become easier because your clients want similar things.
Absolutely,
from that point onwards. So I won't say it's a silver bullet, but it is the thing that gives you absolute clarity and direction thereafter, and I appreciate it might feel narrowing. You might feel like, well, if I go like this, I'm missing out on all of this stuff. The stats say otherwise. When you go narrower, you get more leads from your narrower segment than you were getting before, and you win more of them because you're now a specialist in that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And because you're a specialist, you can charge more for it. So forget the FOMO. And then when you walk through the door, everything opens up. You can see where to do your marketing, you can see how much to spend on your
Yeah.
marketing, you can see what to spend and what to recruit. So you just get clarity and direction and a sense of, oh, I can see how I can build a strategy now rather than just hoping and crossing my fingers.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Janusz. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today and look forward to hearing more about the wonderful things that you're doing with GYDA.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.